The envelope was thick ivory and heavy in my hands, embossed with gold letters that read, Whitmore and Ashcroft Attorneys at Law. Just beneath in black ink was my name, Miss Harper Lane, written in a font far too formal for anything casual. I stared at it for a long moment before breaking the seal. I already knew what it was not, because anyone told me, but because something inside me shifted the day Grandpa died. Like a lock I'd carried for years had finally turned. At brunch, my mother had said it with her usual cool sharpness. William's will is being read next week. Of course, it's just formality. Evelyn is the primary beneficiary. Don't get your hopes up. I didn't answer. I'd learned years ago that disagreeing with her was like shouting into the wind. Nothing ever came back. The letter confirmed what she said there would be a reading. Attendance requested. Then the line that caught me, you have been named among the interested parties. My hands lingered on those words as steam from my coffee curled upward like smoke from a slow-burning fire. I could almost hear my father's voice. Don't embarrass yourself. You were never part of that world. They never intended to be cruel. But the absence of belief cuts deeper than open hostility. I wasn't the favorite. I wasn't Evelyn. I never had been. And yet, I thought about Grandpa's porch in the soft Tennessee evenings, about the time he handed me an old leather journal and said, the ones who sit with you in silence, those are the ones who stay. It was never about the money. I didn't expect his estate or headlines or acknowledgement, but I folded the letter neatly, slid it into my coat pocket, and circled the date on my 2022 calendar. Maybe I wasn't meant to matter in that room, but I was going to stand in it. Growing up in Nashville, Evelyn's name was carved into every conversation in our house, like scripture. Evelyn's solo was perfect. Evelyn's coach says she's destined for Juilliard. Evelyn. 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 They spoke of her like everything she touched turned to gold. I never hated her for it. I just learned to exist in the shadows between her spotlight. While she danced on stages, I lingered in quiet corners, the back steps with a paperback, the barn loft with Grandpa's wooden puzzle boxes. Mom once caught me reading at dinner and snapped, "Why don't you try joining the world?" For once I tried, but it never stuck. I wasn't loud enough, not dazzling enough, not Evelyn enough. Grandpa was the only one who never asked me to be louder. He'd slip me quiet treasures, a brass compass with a missing needle, a faded road atlas, a map of hiking trails he'd never conquered. "See where this takes you?" he'd say, and I'd spend whole afternoons tracing routes through places I'd never seen, feeling like maybe the world wasn't closed to me after all. He understood the way my mind wandered. He never called me special. He didn't need to. The last time I saw him was a Sunday in early October. I'd found a tin of Earl Grey in a boutique downtown Bergamot with dried orange peel and brought it to his house. He brewed 2 mugs without asking what I liked. We sat on his porch while scarlet leaves spun across the yard, both of us wrapped in the kind of silence that doesn't demand fixing. No one knew about that visit. There were no photos, no announcements. He didn't mention the will. He didn't mention anything, really. But as I left, he gripped my hand and said, "You always show up without needing to be seen. That's rarer than you think." It stayed with me. Not because it was praise, but because it felt like permission. Permission to keep showing up as I was, even if no one noticed. Now, as I laid a plain black dress across my bed and buttoned a worn wool coat, I didn't feel prepared or significant. I didn't feel like an heir to anything, but something deep in me pressed forward. Not entitlement, just a quiet insistence that I belonged in that room. Not for them, not even for me, for him. The chapel perched on a hill outside Franklin, its stone walls glistening with early frost. I arrived just before the service began, breath-curling in the sharp Tennessee air. Inside, Perfect Selena already held court in sleek black silk, her stiletto heels an act of defiance against winter. People orbited her like she was the widow, not the granddaughter. She didn't notice me at first, or pretended not to. "I'm here for William Lane," I told the usher. He hesitated just long enough to sting before motioning me toward the side aisle. "You can sit there." The pews brimmed with familiar profiles, old neighbors, family friends, men from the firm. My parents sat in the second row, Selina anchored beside them, her head tilted toward my mother's whisper. I slipped into the back, my coat heavy on my shoulders. No one turned. No one joined me. Someone behind me muttered, "Why is she here?" Another whispered, "I thought she disappeared years ago." I didn't turn around. The words skimmed over me like cold wind through trees, sharp but familiar. The urn rested at the front, small and black, nothing like the man I remembered. Beside it, a photographed grandpa in work gloves, standing by the old cabin, grinning like someone caught between chores and mischief. They played a hymn I didn't recognize. The pastor spoke of faith and legacy, but my gaze stayed locked on that photo. My mind wandered to the porch in October, the tea, the leaves spinning across the yard, the silence that felt like understanding. No one knew about that day. It didn't need explaining. Grief is strange like that. Selina glided in late heels, clicking against the stone floor, her coat draped like a designer ad. She dropped her clutch onto the pew and said loud enough for me to hear, "This is just a formality." Grandpa knew who earned what. Our parents flanked her like bookends, my mother, with that courtroom composure she wore to weddings, funerals, and settlements, equal parts pride and performance. I stayed by the window, far from their orbit. Then the door opened, and in walked Mr. Ashcroft, his leather briefcase tucked under his arm. He nodded once before taking his seat at the small table. "Thank you for coming. We'll now begin the reading of William Lane's will, dated August 14th of last year." Selina crossed her legs and tilted her chin, a picture of certainty. "To my granddaughter, Selina Lane Ashcroft, read, I leave the cabin in Aspen, with all furnishings and the sum of $300,000 to be dispersed within 60 days of probate." Selina's smile widened, not surprise, just confirmation. She cast a glance toward my parents, who each returned a restrained nod, the kind that seals expectations. Ashcroft turned the page. The room seemed to inhale and hold. Selina's smirk lingered as if the rest were a footnote. My mother didn't look back. Silence filled the pews like water in a glass. Everyone assumed that was the end of me, an obligatory invite, nothing more. I folded my hands, steady and still. Ashcroft cleared his throat. "And now?" He glanced at the page. "To Harper Lane." The words landed like soft thunder, quiet but unstoppable. My pulse leapt, but I didn't move. He adjusted his glasses and began to read, and in that instant, the entire room shifted. What Ashcroft read next changed everything. And trust me, you don't want to miss what comes after this. Hit subscribe so you're here when the truth finally drops. Mr. Ashcroft's voice was calm, almost too calm. To my granddaughter, Harper Lane, he read, I leave controlling interest in Lane Development, along with $53.5 million in personal and investment assets. The words didn't land at first. They floated in the air like smoke, waiting for someone to claim them as real. The silence stretched thin. Selina blinked. Once, then again. What she said, her voice cracking like glass. My mother made a small choking sound. My father leaned back slowly, as though something heavy had slammed into his chest. No one looked at me. Ashcroft kept reading, unshaken. This includes 62% ownership of all corporate entities, full voting authority on the board of directors, and complete discretion over leadership and asset allocation moving forward. Selina shot to her feet, her chair screeching against the wood. There has to be some mistake. There's no mistake, Ashcroft replied smoothly. Your grandfather signed these revisions in person, witnessed, notarized, and in full possession of his faculties. My hands were still folded. I hadn't moved. My pulse thundered like it wanted out of my chest. He never said a word to me. Selina's voice turned sharp. He never even liked her. He barely talked about her. Ashcroft closed the file with quiet precision. He left one final statement for the family. His tone softened, shedding legal formality. She was the only one who showed up without a camera. The room sank into a heavier silence, weighted with something none of them could twist clarity. Selina stared stunned. No rage yet, just disbelief. My mother's mouth hung open. her perfectly rehearsed smile fractured. My father looked at me, really looked for the first time in years. His eyes didn't soften. They just held. I wasn't thinking about the millions, or the company, or even the power. I was thinking about Grandpa's porch, the old journal on my lap, and the way he never rushed my quiet. About that October Sunday, no one knew, because it didn't need to be known. Selena finally hissed. "This isn't fair." I met her gaze calm and level. It wasn't meant to be. Ashcroft gathered the documents with deliberate care. "There is one more item your grandfather requested I share. A personal letter." He held out a sealed envelope. My name sprawled across it in a hand I'd know anywhere. I slid it into my coat pocket, unsure if I was ready to open it. But I knew I would, just not in front of them. I waited until I was alone, not just away from the office, but back in the small roadside motel I'd checked into the night before. The heater rattled like loose change and the curtains didn't quite meet in the middle. I sat on the edge of the bed with the envelope in my lap, turning it over once, twice. His handwriting was steady. I traced the capital H in my name before breaking the seal. Inside were 3 folded pages. No date, no greeting. Just my name followed by his words. "Harper, you never asked for anything, but you gave me something none of them could time without agenda." My throat tightened as I read. "I watched you grow up in the quiet corners of a house too loud to hear you. They measured love in applause. You measured it in presence. That Sunday, you came no speech, no performance. You just brought tea and sat with me. No one else knew, and you never told them. That told me everything." I paused, breath-catching. The air felt thinner, as if he were there again, waiting for nothing but the silence we once shared. I changed my will the next week, not out of spite. I love Selena too, in my way, but she never stayed unless there was a lens pointed at her. She memorized every part of my legacy except the one that mattered the time it took to build it. You asked me once why I kept all those maps and journals. You didn't laugh when I said I liked knowing where things had been so I could guess where they might go. I don't care what you do with the company. Keep it. Sell it, rename it. What I'm leaving you isn't concrete. It's trust. Trust that someone who shows up quietly without needing to be seen is exactly the kind of person who should hold the light when everyone else forgets where the switch is. The last line was slower, the loops wider. They'll tell you that you don't deserve it. But I've seen what the world rewards and what it forgets. I'm choosing to remember you. Love, Grandpa. I folded the letter carefully, pressing the crease with my hand, then slid it back into the envelope and tucked it beneath my pillow. It wasn't validation I felt. It was recognition, solid and quiet, like stepping off glass onto ground again. The next morning, I returned to the office for the final paperwork. Mr. Ashcroft had asked me to come alone. But when I stepped inside, they were already there, my parents and Selena sitting stiff in the waiting area like they were posing for a portrait no one wanted. Selena stood the second she saw me. "You manipulated him," she said, each word clipped and deliberate like she'd rehearsed in the mirror. He was old. He didn't know what he was doing. I didn't answer right away. I just looked at her. Really looked. The flawless makeup, the pressed silk blouse, grief ironed into outrage. "I don't need to prove anything," I said quietly. "I just loved him." Her face twisted. "Don't you dare make this about love. He was my grandfather too." I nodded once. "Then you must have known he didn't care for cameras." My mother flinched. My father stared at the floor. Mr. Ashcroft appeared in the doorway, voice steady. Mr. Lane underwent 2 independent mental evaluations before amending his will. Both confirmed full competency. His instructions were deliberate and detailed. "That doesn't make it right," Selena snapped. "No," I said softly. "It just means it was his choice." My mother broke then, not loudly, but in small, trembling sobs. She turned her face away. My father placed a hand on her shoulder, but she didn't take it. Selena gathered her things in quick, jerking movements. "This isn't over," she said, but her voice had lost its center. "You don't get to rewrite the family just because he's gone." I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. Her heels echoed down the hall, sharp and hollow. Mr. Ashcroft gave me a gentle nod. and gestured to the office. Just a few signatures. I followed him in the envelope still pressed against my chest. I hadn't let go of it since last night. Whatever storm had passed, I was still here. Not untouched, but unshaken. The drive to the cabin took just under 2 hours. Snow flurried along the shoulders of the road, the kind that never sticks, but whispers that winter is near. I hadn't been here in over a decade, but the turns came back like muscle memory. The sagging mailbox, the gravel popping under my tires, the old pines standing guard. The key turned easily. Inside, everything was as he'd left it. The pine table, the faded armchair draped with a threadbare blanket, the books leaning slightly left on the shelf. Dust had settled, but nothing had changed. Then I saw it on the mantel above the cold hearth, a photograph. Me age, 10 legs crossed on the porch step, a book in my lap. Grandpa's hand resting on my shoulder. We were both looking at the same page. I didn't know this picture existed. Beside it sat a small leather journal. I opened the first page. His handwriting slanted. Gently, Harper was never loud. That's how I knew I could trust her. The breath left me, like I'd been holding it for years. I sank into the armchair journal in my lap and let the silence fill the room, not heavy, but whole. After a while, I added logs to the fireplace and struck a match. The flame caught slow and certain. For the first time in longer than I could measure, I didn't feel like I had to explain anything to anyone. The room warmed, the edges softened, and I understood this wasn't a burden. It was a beginning. What would you have done in my place? After years of being overlooked, I finally realized that quiet strength speaks louder than noise. Drop a comment, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Would you have walked away or stayed to claim what was yours? If you've ever been underestimated, let this remind you your worth isn't defined by applause. It's measured by presence, consistency, and showing up when no one expects it. Subscribe if you believe in writing your own story, not the one others script for you. Your voice matters. Share your advice below because someone needs your words today.